You know when you need me.
Okay.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Stroke of the Clock. Today I have a special guest, my older brother, and he played a critical role in my recovery. He thought of things that no one else thought about, and he's just been a very good advocate, and I much appreciate everything he's done. So, Marshall, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So, like Brian said, my name's Marshall, and I'm his older brother. And I was actually here in Palm Desert when I got the call that Brian had been admitted to the hospital. And within a day, I think the next day or a day after, I got to Seattle, and that's kind of when we started finding out more information. Well, at first we really didn't know what was going on. We just knew that it wasn't good. And I stayed with Brian the first night I got to Seattle. I stayed with him in his hotel room, and that's the night in your hospital room.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. We spent so much time there, it was almost like a hotel. But that night is the night that you went into your coma.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it was kind of a mad rush for everybody in the family to try to figure out, you know, first of all, just to process all the things that we were being told by the doctor.
Yeah.
And then trying to take that information in and figure out what it all meant. So there was a lot of time spent on computers and phones and tablets researching and trying to find out as much information as we could so that we had the information to advocate on his behalf. So
so my brothers, if you guys probably remember the photographs that I showed you when I was in the hospital, that's my brother that was there with me. So I would like to talk a little bit about how important it is to think outside the box during your recovery. You have to try to do everything you can, and so for example, I had never gone to Pilates in my entire life, and my brother recommended to my mom that we do Pilates. So my mom called Jordan, or she called the Pilates studio that Jordan worked at, and so, but that would have never happened if not for my brother. So that's just another example of how important it is to have people thinking for you while you're not thinking straight for yourself. So, and then when I went to Pushing Boundaries, Marshall had a friend that worked as a physical therapist, and she told him about Pushing Boundaries, which changed everything for me. So if I've been telling you how important advocates are in your recovery, and that's just another example of my brother advocating for me and seeing what was working and what wasn't working. So he went one time to that my outpatient rehab center, and then he realized that wasn't going to ever get me to where I need to be. So then he found Pushing Boundaries, and I'm so thankful that he did. But do you have anything else to say?
yeah, well, you know, I mean, once we kind of took in that he was sick and that we started to understand the things that were happening to him, we really understood that, you know, even though at that time he was in a coma and he was in the hospital, recovery really was starting then. That we needed to do everything that we could to provide every opportunity for Brian to have, you know, even with what he was going through, peace of mind. And it was hard because he wasn't able to communicate with us as to how he was feeling, what he understood, whether he did or didn't understand what was happening. And so I reached out to a yoga instructor. I had lived in Seattle for many, many years, and I had started doing yoga there. And my instructor there, her name was Robin, and she was really not only just a great yoga instructor, but also just kind of an inspiration as far as her spiritual practice. And so I called her, or I don't know if I called her, I reached out to her. Either I called her or I texted with her and explained what was going on with my brother. And she said, one of the things that you may want to do is you may want to bring in a Reiki person to work with your brother. And so she gave me a couple of names, and I talked to a couple of them who gave me a couple of other people, and what we found is that there was a network of these people who were willing to come into hospitals and to work with patients. And so we brought one in many, many times for my brother, and there would be times where you could tell by just the expression on his face that he was under a lot of duress. And these people would come in and spend like an hour with him. They would read what was going on inside him, and I would come into the room afterwards because they wanted to be alone with him, and he would have just the most peaceful look on his face. He'd have color back, and they could say, here's what he's experiencing, and they were able to communicate to us, he's not in pain, he is at peace, he understands what's going on. And whether you believe in that kind of stuff or not, when you're in these situations, stuff like that's incredibly encouraging for the family, because we don't have that information. And so we started that kind of immediately, looking to, we understood the importance of Western medicine, but I've always felt that there's, also a lot of value in alternative medicines. And so,
could you explain what a Reiki is?
I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, a Reiki healer, it's a spiritual healer.
Yeah, a spiritual healer.
And I believe that what they are doing is they are readjusting energy in your body.
Yeah.
And they are identifying where you are having energy blocks.
Yes.
And they're helping you to work through moving that energy around so that your body is more in tune. And that is not a technical, and if it's wrong, I'm very sorry, but that's kind of my very little understanding. And the thing that I always thought was, this can't hurt anybody.
No.
I mean, no one's going to be worse off for this experience.
No.
And so, I figured anything is worth a shot.
Yeah, and definitely, I don't remember that time in my in my coma, but I remember coming out of my coma and being very much at peace.
Yeah.
So something was going on, because, like I said in prior videos, I had pretty extreme brain damage. So, I had terrible cramps and all that during my time I was in my coma, and still, when I came out of my coma, I was at peace. So something was definitely working.
And I think, the other thing, because with these videos, it's great information for people who have had a stroke and that experience, but it's also something that's going to be helpful for their families, because their families, oftentimes it's a family member that feels the responsibility for helping.
Yes.
And feels very lost because there's just not a ton of information out there. And also just knowing, one of the things that as a family unit, and that was Mom, Dad, Christy, myself, James, anyone that was there, and plus the friends that came every day.
Yeah.
Jackie was there all the time, who was a registered nurse and was invaluable, but we never left you alone.
No.
We didn't just rely upon the hospital and the doctors to understand what was going on with you. We may not have known what was going on with you medically all the time, but we were always looking at you. And you said you had terrible cramps. We knew that. We would be in there massaging your legs and your arms and your feet, moving you, making sure that you weren't being left in one position. And I think that's one thing that is part of the importance of advocacy. Is just, there is a common sense component to it. You're there, you're able to look and see what's going on. you may not know medically what to do,
Yes.
but you're a human being and you can see when another human being is suffering.
Yeah.
And there are things you can do immediately
Yeah.
to at least try to help that.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you doing all that. And I've always been the type of person that I don't let my recovery happen to me. I make my recovery happen. And I think there's a distinction between those two things, because people that let the recovery happen to them, they're only going to get so far, because you have to be driven to take charge of your recovery. And I think that's very important. For a perfect example of that is we were recently, as of last week, researching stroke recovery and how to really walk again. And this guy out of Denmark, who's a neurologist, and his wife had a stroke, and she was also a doctor, and she said, this was not acceptable to me. I hadn't get able to walk again. And so it took her 5 years, but she ended up teaching herself to walk again. And so we're watching her videos to implement her ideas into my workout routine. And that's just as of a week ago. So I'm constantly looking for new and current information, and I'm never just letting the grass grow under my feet. I'm constantly seeking out better ways to improve. And I think that's very important. I hope that everybody does that, because it's not gonna happen if you just stay the course and think, well, I'm just gonna get as much out of this as I can, and then I'm just gonna live with it. That would be unfortunate, because I think you're gonna really limit yourself on what you can accomplish.
Yeah, and again, as advocates, whether you're a friend or a family member, once Brian was released, then it was just a series of appointments. All the different doctors, all the different therapists, and we would always go with Brian, at least one member of our family, to for example, the therapy sessions, the occupational therapist. And I went with Brian one time, and I was just kind of standing back watching what was going on. And I, as most of my adult life, have been really active, and I've done a lot of different things. I've done yoga, I've done Pilates, I'm a runner, and I was just watching what was going on, and it at least seemed really clear to me that this path wasn't going to lead where you needed to go. Not to disparage what was happening, but it just wasn't the level of what you really needed. And I had always taken Pilates reformer classes and was on a machine, and so you don't have to be able to stand independently or walk independently to be on a machine like that, and yet you have the ability to have weight resistance. It stretches you, and what was very clear from the beginning with Brian was that he needed to elongate his muscles again, because you were drawn up, and it was harder for you to stretch out. And the physical therapy that was happening in your house, that was the main focus, a lot of it. But when you left, the focus was on walking, but yet they didn't really have the tools to do the stages I felt that you needed in order to really get there.
And how did you happen upon pushing boundaries?
Well, my friend Tiffany, who I went to college with, she is an occupational therapist in Seattle, and I reached out to her and I said, here's what's going on. Are there people or places that you can recommend for my brother who has these needs? And she said yes, and one of those was pushing boundaries. And I think you've alluded to it or stated it in your other videos, is that this is a private company. It costs money to do it.
Yes.
But going to one of your therapy sessions there, which we all went to several of them, it's a completely different animal.
Yeah, it's like night and day, the difference between the outpatient that I was going to and pushing boundaries. Because pushing boundaries is a private company, so it costs money to go there. But if you can afford it, I'd highly recommend going to an intensive rehab center. And pushing boundaries is an intensive rehab center. It's 2 hours a day. So, but I would highly recommend that anybody who wants to gain back more of their old selves seek out the best center because I do know that there's only 2 local mats in the United States, one of which is in Redmond, Washington, and the other one's in Los Angeles. And so, I'm sure that there's places that you can go to anywhere in the country and get more out of your recovery than just the standard go to physical therapy, do a half an hour's work, and then go home. So I'm a big believer in seeking out those places.
Yeah, and I think, what I'm taking away from watching this experience with you, with having this channel, is you're starting to really try to create a community.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people must feel, because I know that we felt that way as a family, is you're very alone.
Yes.
Like, you don't know anything about what is going on. You may or may not know people who have experienced it. And even if you know them, there hasn't been a great deal of discussion about it. And so it's a lot of effort to try to identify these resources.
Yes.
And it's a lot of effort in a time where you're already exerting a lot of effort just to kind of come to terms with what is going on. And so by providing access to information, and this isn't you aren't the only person doing this. Like you said, you're finding other people, and I think it's building that web so that information is easily accessible to people, because it would be so helpful and so encouraging. And you and I have talked about what what you see happening in the future as far as what you want to do, and it really is just about making it so that other people have an easier experience, not that it's easy, but easier experiencing accessing information.
Yes.
And understanding steps, because it is a little like you have to, at least in your case, in our case as a family, it kind of felt like we had to invent everything.
Yes.
We had to, there was a lot of trial and error. And like when you were talking about pushing boundaries, a lot of the things that you did at pushing boundaries, you still do. Like those are things that you have incorporated into. So it's not like you have to go forever. And maybe there's times when you do it, you're away for a while, you make gains, and you're like, I'm going to go back for a period. Because now I can really benefit from what they were doing, where before I was trying, but maybe I didn't get it because I wasn't really there yet. And that's the thing is, and I think it's important, is that a lot of the doctors, as you say, were real doomsdayers.
Yes.
They'll give you a window, and they'll say, if you don't have this back in this amount of time, this is where you're going to be. And you have shown that that's not the case. And 5 years later, you're still making progress, and that is not what they were saying.
No.
Any of the Western medicine doctors.
No, they were really negative. I pointed that out in prior videos.
And not all, but a lot.
Not all of them, but a lot of them.
And you see a lot of doctors.
So, it's I think the most important part of any rehabilitation is having a positive mental attitude. And it's really hard to remain positive when you've had such severe consequences like I have had and a lot of people have had. But I would just encourage anybody that's going through an experience like mine to find the strength to remain positive. I think that is worth more than physical therapy, and all the money in the world can't buy you the results a positive mental attitude will get you.
And you have said at times where you've said, I'm getting my life back, and you say it's not the same life.
Yes.
It's a different life.
A different life.
But I'm getting it back.
Yeah.
And I think that is, feeds into being positive about it.
Yes.
Where whatever's happening, never lose sight of the first day of this experience.
Yes.
Because now that was a hard day.
It was a hard day. Yeah.
And at that day, I don't think you necessarily ever knew that this day would come.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know what would happen to me, frankly. I mean, I have made a lot of progress, and I'm still making progress. And but I'm constantly thinking about what more I can do, and that is the key for me. The key has been thinking, what else can I do to get my life back, or get some resemblance of my life back? So,
or forging your new life.
Yeah, forging my new life. So,
and you've made some very, I think, when you think of what you lost, you also have to acknowledge that you've made different friends, new friends, deeper connections with people on different levels.
Yeah.
And those are gifts.
Yeah, but it's not all bad. I mean, there's a lot of positive that comes out of having a medical emergency such as I have. You have to, you get a kind of a second chance to develop your
character.
I mean, your life. And so although it's been really hard, I can't imagine what I'd be doing if this hadn't happened to me. I think that I am now much more optimistic than I ever have been. Even before my strokes, I was kind of a pessimistic person, and now I'm the polar opposite. I'm a very optimistic person, and so I think that's important to just accept your life as it is now, and strive to make it better every day.
I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to tell my viewers?
Well, I just am very proud of my brother for what he's doing. I think it takes a great deal of courage, and it takes a great deal of compassion.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Marshall. I love you.
I love you too.
Until next time, I hope you've enjoyed my video, and if you do enjoy my content and my videos, I'd encourage you to subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe button, and I encourage all comments that anybody would like to leave, either it be they like it or they hate it, or any ideas for future videos. I read all comments, and I take that all very seriously. So I welcome you to say whatever you want.
And if you like it, give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, and if you like it, give it a thumbs up. So until next time, I wish you good health and good day.
Bye.